guys, it's Nassim here. Now before I start the video, I want you to do me a favor. Take a look at the M1 iPad Pro and take a look at the M2 MacBook Air and tell me, what's the difference? Now of course the main difference between the M1 iPad Pro and the M2 MacBook Air is that one is a tablet and the other is a laptop. But I think that as far as the idea behind these devices, they're pretty much the same thing. And I say this because the M1 iPad Pro is a really good tablet that is great at what it's intended for. And I also think that the M2 MacBook Air is a great laptop that is good at what it's intended for. But one thing that bothers me when it comes to both of these devices is that they're given much more power than they know what to do with. The iPad Pro doesn't need an M1 chip and the MacBook Air doesn't need an M2 chip. It's not that deep. The MacBook Air series as a whole is generally meant for light use, such as schoolwork, light work from home, and general browsing on the internet. If you want to use this MacBook to edit, it has the power to run it very well with that signature chip, but it doesn't have fans, so your laptop will get really hot within 15 minutes of opening the application. So for your and the computer's long-term safety, it's best not to try it. And don't get me wrong, it's an amazing laptop, it runs everything well, but you won't be able to use the M2 chip to its full capacity, so technically you're better off getting the M1 MacBook Air for a cheaper price and basically the same amount of power. Now starting with the display, the M2 MacBook Air has a 13-inch LED backlit display that on the surface looks really good. Whenever I was scrolling through the internet or the regular interface, I never felt that it was lacking. At first, I wasn't a huge fan of the notch, but it really grew on me, especially since it's never in the way when you're watching videos or using a laptop, and it was a nice change of pace considering the fact that Apple's MacBooks have had the same look for 10 plus years. The brightness is the exact same as the MacBook Pro, and both displays have a good amount of brightness, but I still had difficulty when using it outside at work because the sun was that much stronger. But whenever I was in the house, no matter how much the sun was beaming through my windows, I still could see very well. Now the last thing that I loved about the display was how sharp and clean everything looked. I mainly would use it for media consumption, so whenever I was watching a movie or on YouTube, it looked really good and vibrant. And I wanted to give you guys an example of the display to give you some insight on my experiences with it.
And they wanted to sponsor a look at their new Odyssey Arc gaming monitor. I've seen some pretty crazy monitors in my time, but nothing like this. So this is a massive 55-inch corner-to-corner, 165 hertz curved gaming monitor.
Now, one of the things that I loved about the MacBook Air was the whole dock of the laptop. From the keyboard to where the speakers were located, all the way to how nice it looked compared to last year's model. The keyboard got great travel whenever I was writing scripts for my videos, and it felt like every single MacBook that's out right now, which was really good. Even looking at the keyboard as a whole, the M2 Air matches the top tier MacBooks, and even though they didn't include the touch bar like they did on the MacBook Pro, I still like that they cared enough to update it with a more responsive Touch ID sensor. The mouse was responsive, it still had the same press down mechanisms as before, but something that I didn't like about the M2 was that my fingers would make the keyboard really shiny due to excess oil. Even if I did something small like put lotion on, I had to wipe my fingertips to avoid the keyboard getting dirty. Now the webcam made a huge improvement. It's now 1080p, so if you're someone who works at home or does some homeschooling, then you'll be able to get really good quality. I recently did a meeting and was happy with not only the quality of the camera, but also the clarity of the mic. Now one thing that I really liked about the M2 MacBook Air was the extra convenience. On the side we have a MagSafe charger along with two USB-C Thunder ports, which resulted in me having extra space to include different adapters and even have an extra option to charge my laptop. It took me about an hour and 10 minutes to charge all the way up to 100%, which was pretty fast, and I would get a full day of charge with the battery, doing simple tasks and getting work done. The speakers were also really good. Something that I liked was that Apple was able to put them in a discrete spot to continue the simple aesthetic, and surprisingly, it didn't ruin the quality. Now the speakers on the MacBook Air are some of the best that I have heard on any laptop. They were loud, crystal clear, full of bass, all while still maintaining amazing quality. I love that no matter how much I turned up the volume, I was still able to get great quality, and this was something that I didn't expect with a cheaper option. And it was something that I really appreciated about the MacBook speaker, and to give you guys an idea of what I mean, I will be putting the speakers on full blast while playing the video.
Bryant going to the basket. Kobe Bryant! There it is! A 50-point game! Final minute 30. Bryant from 14 has 53! Unbelievable stuff tonight.
Now the portability on this MacBook is top tier. It's extremely light and thin, and whenever I would be carrying it around or putting it in my bag, it never weighed me down like whenever I'm carrying my 13-inch MacBook Pro. So now that I've gotten the things that I really liked about this MacBook out of the way, I wanted to tell you guys some of the things that I really didn't like about it and what Apple should have done to fix it. Now the first problem that I had with the MacBook was the price. Now this MacBook Air starts around $1,200, which is $200 more than the previous version. And if you want to upgrade for better RAM, storage, etc., you can pay for the $1,400 version, which is really absurd to me. And as long as the MacBook Air doesn't have any fans, you'll always be putting a ton of strain on it if you were to edit. So no matter how much you spend, you'll never be able to get the true power, which means you're limited for a higher price. Now the next problem was the fact that the base model storage only starts at 256 gigs, which really is not a lot of storage. Also, the pre-installed apps take up some of that storage, so you aren't even getting the full 256 gigs. Also, if you're like me and edit on Final Cut Pro, there will be many times where you're done putting a good amount of footage on your computer. The space will fill up quick, and since there are extra render files, I really think Apple could have put in more storage, especially since they're charging extra money. And finally, the main thing that I didn't like about the M2 MacBook Air was the lack of fans to cool down the system. And this is a big deal for me because whenever I'm on my laptop, 90% of the time I'm editing or writing for videos, so if I'm spending a good amount of money, I would prefer something that can handle a very heavy workload. But this MacBook comes up kind of short. I really wish they would have gotten rid of the 13-inch MacBook Pro so that they could merge the two together, because let's be honest, the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro was a disappointment. The MacBook Air is Apple's highest selling laptop, so they could have kept the name, kept the new look, and added some fans. And the last thing that I didn't like was the fact that the laptop as a whole is an oil and fingerprint magnet. Like right here, you can see all of the fingerprints and grease stains, especially with the color that I have. And this resulted in me having to keep my microfiber cleaning cloth on me at all times. So all in all, I think that when we look at the M2 MacBook Air, we look at the price, we look at the features, we look at the different design, and we look at the total value of the product. And I would personally say that there are much better options in the MacBook lineup as a whole. I think that if it would have kept the same price as last year's model, then my expectations and critique wouldn't be as hard. But once a laptop is priced over $1,100, I expect it to be a workhorse and strong enough to do any task with no problem. But that's not the case with this laptop. It's an overly powered light use machine that is really good if you want to write essays, browse the web, do web meetings, etc. So if you're looking to get something that's powerful and can handle a heavy workload with fans included, then you're better off beefing up the M2 MacBook Pro to fit your needs, or you can get the M1 MacBook Air, which you can get a really good deal on and still be able to do everything that you would on the M2 MacBook Air. So as a whole, I'm pretty confused by the purpose of this laptop. There are better and cheaper options, but if you still want to get it, I will say that it's really good for what it's intended for. You won't have any problems doing light tasks, and you'll be very happy with your purchase. And there it is, my review on the M2 MacBook Air. Now let me know down in the comments, what do you think is Apple's main purpose for releasing this laptop? Let me know. And if you guys made it to the end of this video, I'd like to say thank you for sticking around. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe, it'll be very appreciated. And as far as social media, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.